this video contains spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Finish the game and then come back. You have been warned. If you played Final Fantasy VII Remake, then you witnessed a mostly faithful retelling of the Midgar arc in FF7. For the most part, these scenes have been reworked to a pretty good success. However, there is one scene in particular that is one of my favorite scenes in the entire Midgar arc, and honestly the entire game, that was heavily reworked in this remake. This reworked moment I'm referring to is of course the Genova blood trail, which plays out entirely different in the remake than it does in the original. And you guys know I was really looking forward to that one. So what happened? In the original PlayStation 1 Classic, the party is imprisoned inside of Shinra HQ, with the party members divided into different prison cells. After getting some sleep, the party awakens to find their cell doors open, and the guard standing watch over them, dead. As they go along, they find a blood trail, and along this trail they find bodies, who are described to be quite mutilated. Furthermore, there are claw marks on the wall. It becomes immediately clear that whatever you're dealing with is not human. The suspense would continue all the way until you followed it up to President Shinra, getting a little bit of Masamune acupuncture treatment. In these few moments, the game's tone immediately turned from a fantasy RPG into something straight out of Resident Evil, and it did so to great effect and was one of the most memorable scenes in the original game. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, instead of having prison cells, you would all be imprisoned inside of the room that Aerith grew up in. And of course, there would still be a blood trail, sort of, but it was now purple Genova Goop with some sparkle effects. And rather than waking up to find out that this happened, you sort of just come along and find the blood trail. And rather than finding Genova's victims along the way, you instead find nothing of the sort. And instead of finding a, let's just say, defeated President Shinra, you instead find him hanging off of the edge of a building, and you know the rest. It honestly begs the question why this scene in Final Fantasy VII Remake was changed so heavily, especially when the original version of this scene was utilized to such great effect. While I have to admit this change was fairly disappointing, it's also pretty likely that it wasn't something that was the developer's fault. Though the exact reason isn't known, we have some pretty good ideas as to why it was. Unfortunately, game developers aren't always able to express their full creativity due to various external reasons, and in this case, I believe there are a few likely reasons for this change. Bear in mind, none of these are actually confirmed, however there are things that my single-digit IQ brain finds to be quite likely. The first reason I theorize that it might have been removed is that it may be a thing to do with the game's current age rating, though despite this we have a generous amount of human juice being used in Crisis Core, a game which was rated T14 in the United States and a Sarah rating B in Japan, which, by the way, while in the United States here for example we sort of just have a flat teen rating, in Japan there are actually multiple levels in between before you hit our equivalent of the M rating. 0B for 12+, 0C for being age 15+, and 0D for being ages 17+. And then you hit 0Z, which is essentially the ESRB's equivalent of the AO rating. Considering that Final Fantasy VII as it stands now is rated at 0C, again being 15+, it honestly stands to reason that if you add the use of alcohol, suggestive themes, the use of profanity, and all the other things that Final Fantasy VII Remake has, on top of Genova's breakfast being spilled all over the floor, it does kind of question if it would push the game's boundary beyond its current age rating. And as mentioned earlier, it's more than just the red Kool-Aid on the floor. You also find Genova's victims along the way. Judging by the fact that the people that you meet along this trail have, let's just say, met with a terrible fate, they would have had to present them in something quite gruesome for HD graphics, which almost definitely would push the age ratings limitation. And also, for some reason, at least in my playthrough, it seems that they removed the claw marks on the walls and they aren't present in the remake. The other possible consideration is, of course, that Square Enix wanted to release this game on the Chinese market, a place where there are heavy restrictions on blood being shown, usually resulting in it being outright removed. And now there are new restrictions that outright say no blood, no dead bodies, though ironically, you can still technically kill people. With this being the case, it would also explain why they chose to drastically change this scene, as they would essentially have to rework this entire section, and do so just to abide by the guidelines in one region, and it would be extremely expensive to rework. Hence, I'm sure they decided it was better to go with one unified vision. The ban on bodies would also explain why the shish kebab to President Shinra would also be changed. As a result, the best business idea would be to focus on one singular unified vision. Between these two things, this is why I suspect that the scene was so heavily reworked, despite being one of the most iconic scenes in FF7. It's definitely not something that ruins the remake, but it was something that I feel like the creatives didn't have much of a choice in anyways, so I'm not too harsh on it. That being said, I would still love it if it were like it was in the original game, as that honestly is the better scene for this part of the game. But that's just my opinion, and now I want to hear yours, so like, subscribe, click the bell icon, and let me know below in a comment saying which scene that you prefer. And if you value my content, be sure to check out the Patreon for the Night Sky Prince, where I'm supported by incredible people like Tim Rogers, which holy crap, thank you so much, Tim. It really is an honor to have your support. Means like the whole world to me. So thank you so much. And if you would like to join Tim, there is a link in the description below. Shout out to Tim and the rest of the Ultima community.